present, all counsel present, jury, and alters present. Good afternoon. Ms. Everett-Walker, you're still on oath, and the defense may continue.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Everett-Walker.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
One of the items on the chart that you prepared is the first item where it says cash, and then the second item under cash is LGI Consulting accounts. You see that?
Yes.
And the figures you put down there under estate and divorce were solely based on the amount of money excuse me, in that account, correct?
That's correct.
Did you determine, well, first of all, do you know what LGI stands for?
I don't.
Would it refresh your memory? Luigi, Jessica, and Isabella, the 3 children of Fabio?
That sounds correct.
Okay. And it says consulting account. Did you know what that company did?
It was for consulting income. I know that it received income from the app, and it also received other income in 15 and 16, the years of tax returns that I had.
When you say the app, what do you mean the app?
The funds that were received from the
Scissor Boy?
Scissor Boy, that's the name of it. The minimal income that came from that was deposited in that account.
Did you investigate as to what Scissor Boy meant or what it did?
I just understood it to be an app.
An app that was created by Fabio or someone else, did you know?
It was created by Fabio and one other person, and I understood there to be a dispute after Fabio's death. That person, I understood, told Monica one thing.
Okay, but in any event, whatever this company did for the amount of money that it was in the account, did you know if there was a contract between LGI and Wella or Cody or Procter & Gamble that was paying money to LGI? Well, do you know the source of the money that was in LGI consulting accounts?
I understood it to be consulting income.
Okay, but that's all you knew about it?
No, I was dividing the cash. I wasn't valuing a business.
Well, you were dividing it in half, but this was supposed to be an account, a chart that compared divorce with death. Is that right?
Correct. So I'm dividing the asset.
And you assumed that once Fabio died, there would be no further income coming into that account?
I did not. I'm simply dividing the cash here.
Okay, but if in fact that was some kind of app or company or whatever that was generating income as a result of Fabio, then there would be a difference between his death and getting a divorce. Is that right?
As it relates to the app, we talked about that a little bit earlier, and I disregarded the settlement amount of $25,000 because I didn't know what the offset might be for any community income, but it seems an asset that is settled for $25,000 likely wasn't worth much.
Okay, when you say settled, in other words, the company that was Scissor Boy settled with the estate for $25,000 to cover any future income that might have been coming their way otherwise.
I'm going to object. That calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Did you determine what the $25,000 was for?
As I said, I disregarded both sides of that transaction.
But $25,000 was paid into the estate. Is that right?
Yes, and I disregarded it.
Well, but it was money that went to the estate, either to Monica or Fabio's heirs. It went to somebody, right?
I understood it to go to Monica, but I did not include it in the $1.5 million.
Okay. Now, did you know whether, well, let me ask you this. If you had investigated and determined that there was additional money that would have come into LGI had Fabio lived, you would have included that in the divorce side of the chart, correct?
Objection calls for speculation and assumes facts not in evidence.
So I'll leave it with this, then you had no idea whether or not money would have continued to come into LGI or not as a result of Fabio's death or anything else. You had no idea. Fair statement?
That's not correct.
Okay. Why is it not correct?
That account is a DBA for Monica Sementilli.
Okay.
And so I assumed that Monica would be the one operating that account, operating that business, although I attributed no value to the business and did not equalize it, in essence, having her repay that.
But in looking at the income tax, it was income tax that was included in their joint income tax return, right?
It's community income.
Okay, so it wasn't just for hers. Fabio and her paid jointly income tax on whatever came into that account, correct?
Again, objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Let me ask you this. Did you attempt at all to discuss Scissor Boy with Mr. Rubin?
I did not discuss Scissor Boy with Mr. Rubin.
Or this person, Grant, you said was in charge of Scissor Boy? Is that what you said? Some person?
Objection assumes facts not in evidence and misstates the evidence.
I did not discuss Grant with Mr. Rubin.
Okay. So the extent, again, of your consideration of LGI was just what was in the account at the time of Fabio's death. Is that right?
That's incorrect.
You disregarded the $25,000.
That's one of the things.
Okay. Didn't you put those figures up there under LGI?
Yes, but this is a division of assets.
Okay.
On the income side, in terms of what would then after this come in, I assumed those monies would go to Monica.
But you assumed that without any further investigation as to whether or not that was true or not.
I assumed that based on the fact that the DBA is for Monica Sementilli.
Understood. But as far as what the source was of that income, or how it got there, or whether it would continue or not, you didn't conduct any investigation into that, did you?
Fabio had a full-time job. Monica did not. I assumed that the consulting income was hers.
And again, that was your assumption, correct?
That's correct.
And that's why you put it up there in your chart, right?
No, that's not correct.
All right, correct me.
This is a division of the asset.
Right.
This is just dividing just the cash asset. So whatever was in that account being divided if there's a death versus if there's a divorce. It has nothing to do with what happens after the date it's divided. So on any of these, none of it matters what happens after the fact. The investment accounts, the cash accounts, nothing matters after the day it's divided.
Including your calculations of divorce. You had no idea of knowing whether divorce would involve litigation, or how long it would take, or if the house would increase in value or not, anything of that nature. You couldn't figure out. You were limited to that one date of his death, right?
Well, I can break down two of those. I did not consider attorney's fees and what that would cost in the divorce. And I used the value of the house when it was sold for the death, and I used that same value for the divorce as the buyout date.
Okay. And you also included in under the benefits to Monica under death, that 6 months of salary that his company paid after he died, correct?
That's correct.
And you included health and And eye insurance, all the health care insurance as well, correct? That they paid for.
That's correct.
And the car forgiveness of the loan, is that right?
No.
Okay, let me skip that. The vacation pay.
I included that in the death benefits.
And in the pension as well, correct?
I included the pension in the death benefits.
All right, let me start with the salary. You had no information that Monica, at the time of Fabio's death, knew that Cody was going to pay 6 months' salary to her after his death, correct?
That's correct. I did not know, I don't know that Monica knew that that would be paid.
But because it was paid, you included it in the death benefits,
That's correct.
as well as all the insurance, is that right?
The insurance payments may have been discussed, but I don't have a document that shows that.
When you say the car, there was a car forgiveness, what do you mean by that?
The company forgave the car, but there's no attribution of any value under death or divorce in the schedule.
What do you mean forgave the car?
There was a car note, a $9,000 car note.
That the company had put up?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's zero value under death and divorce attributed in the schedule.
And again, you didn't know whether Monica Sementilli knew there was going to be a car forgiveness or not?
Correct, and it's zero
Okay.
here.
And the same would apply to the vacation pay? You had no way of knowing if she was aware they were going to pay his vacation pay as a result of his death?
Well, I think that's pretty common knowledge that those things get paid out when you leave a job, or I assume when you pass away.
Okay, so you made several assumptions in this case, as you had to, based on what you were asked to do. Is that correct?
Well, I made assumptions on certain things, yes.
Okay. Was there tax? Were those benefits taxable? In other words, the increased salary, any health care, pension, vacation, was that taxable?
Anything that was taxable, I included the net amount after tax.
Okay, so that was taken off your figures up there, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And again, when it came to the house calculations, you used just the amount of the sale, not considering whether the house would go up in value or not, if there were divorce proceedings during the course of divorce proceedings and so forth. Is that right?
I assumed that the buyout would have occurred at the same time as the sale. That's correct.
Now, I believe on your chart, you indicated under the house that as community property, each side would, Monica and the estate of Fabio would have been entitled to 50% of the net proceeds. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But then under death, you indicated that Monica would receive all of the proceeds of the sale, correct?
That's correct.
Do you know whether or not the house in fact was sold?
Yes.
Okay, and that's where you got your figures from, correct?
Yes.
Do you know how much of that Monica received?
I believe she received half of it.
And the other half went to Fabio's estate, is that correct?
Yes.
So even though there was a death, obviously, the killing of Fabio, the money, the value of the house, net proceeds were split between the two sides, correct?
Yes.
You know why? If she was entitled to 100% of the benefit?
I object. That assumes facts, not evidence, and also misstates the evidence.
That's overruled.
I believe that my understanding is that if she's found not guilty, she will receive the balance of the estate.
So it's your understanding that she was given half of it before the results of any trial or any proceeding, and then would have to give it back if she were convicted? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that I was told that she will receive the balance of the estate, so the other half, if she's found not guilty.
Well, but do you know why she was given half to begin with when that determination had not yet been made?
I don't.
Who gave you the information regarding this issue involving the house and half and then giving half back if she's convicted and so forth?
Again, that's
There's no evidence of
that's
that.
not happening.
Excuse me. There's no evidence of that.
Can you tell us, was that sustained, did you say?
I said there's no evidence of that.
Oh. Did you have a source of information concerning what happened to the house to include in your chart?
When you say what happened to the house, which,
No, how did you get the information to put up those figures involving the house, the sale, what the costs were, what the mortgage was, net proceeds, so forth?
I have a document.
And the document was prepared by who?
I would have to look. I think it's some kind of escrow document, but I would have to look to know for sure.
You don't know the source of that?
Not off the top of my head, but I have a document.
And was that from the escrow company or the estate? I'm sorry, can you find that document and answer that question if you can?
Yes.
If it's handy?
It is from the escrow company.
But where did you get the information concerning that Monica would have to give back 50% of the money that she got from the proceeds of the sale?
So there's no evidence of that at all. You're the only one saying that.
Well, the witness just said it
She
as...
did not say that if there was a conviction, the defendant would have to give back half. She didn't say that. She said if there was an acquittal, the defendant would get the other half.
Okay. And since the judge is the one who said that, I assume that's what your understanding was? Is that correct? What the judge just said?
Yes. My understanding is that if she's acquitted, she will receive the other half.
But no understanding as to what would happen if she was convicted?
No, I have no understanding.
And no understanding as to why, before the results of any legal proceedings, she got 50% and 50%, it was divided that way. You don't know why.
I do not.
You just took the figures as they were. Is that right?
I'm calculating the amounts that are due under both scenarios, not what she received or what she hasn't received so far. This has nothing to do with the amounts and how they've been distributed thus far. This is just the total amount due.
Okay. And again, looking at your chart up there, based on the difference that you have on the right side, which is the difference between death and divorce that Monica would have received, again, you made no effort to determine anything about the stock options, when they were due, when they weren't due, and so forth. Correct?
That's not correct.
Well, you certainly didn't know that you certainly used the figure of 2024 as the amount that Monica would receive in death without ever knowing whether or not the options were worth that, for instance, back in 2017, 18, 19, 20, or any of those years before 2024. You didn't know those figures, did you?
That's correct.
So you just assumed what the price was in 2024 is what she would have received, would have been her benefit due to the death of Fabio Sementilli, correct?
That's correct.
Now, I take it you were given two choices in your assignment. That is, what the financial realities would be or were as a result of his death, and what they would have been, based on your calculation, since it didn't occur, if there had been a divorce, right?
Correct. I was to compare those two scenarios.
Okay. And the amounts that you included as a result of death were based on figures that you had before you, for the most part, correct?
Correct. Documentation, and to the extent we had or could get documentation. So there are figures, like I testified earlier, there are figures that are not included because I could not get documentation.
Okay. And as far as the divorce, since no divorce ever occurred, that was based on your speculation after investigation and research and what you thought were the proper figures, correct?
I would not characterize it as speculation.
All right, well, how would you characterize it?
Well, I think what is reflected here on the divorce side is my experience. This is what we do in characterizing assets and dividing them in family law. I excluded the things that I believe were based on speculation. We talked a little bit about them, but I didn't include the things that I believed were speculative.
But you have to agree that things such as alimony and so forth are very subjective figures. Is that correct?
Correct. That's why it's not on here.
Not even included at all in there, in that chart.
Correct, but Miss
Silverman?
Silverman and I discussed it so that it was at least the jury is at least aware of the amounts, at least in a general sense. But it is not included on here.
Was that your decision or Miss Silverman's or what?
That was my decision.
Not to include alimony as to one of the benefits of a divorce.
Not to include it on the schedule and to discuss it so that the information was provided, but to be very clear about what we know and what is an assumption or what is speculation.
Fair enough. Now, have you ever been asked before in the course of your employment and your job to do a death versus divorce assessment?
Objection irrelevant.
I have not.
So this is the first time you have been asked to assess and come up with figures in a death versus divorce scenario, correct?
I have never put them on a schedule and compared them. That's correct.
But you were not given any other options other than death or divorce, correct?
Well,
in your calculation.
I was asked to compare the financial benefit, whether there was a financial benefit of between divorce and a murder or a death. And so I came up with quantifying the amounts received if there's a death versus what we would do in a community property balance sheet in a family law matter. So I wouldn't characterize it as I was given a choice to do this. This was the analysis that I came up with based on the instructions that I was given. This is what we're looking for. This is what we want to understand. And so in order to understand that, this is the analysis that I did.
You want to understand if there was any motive for her to kill her husband to get benefits that she wouldn't have gotten as part of a divorce, right? That was the end question you were being asked, correct?
Well, I think the question was any benefit. I don't think motive was the initial question.
So let me ask you this. There was a third option for Monica Sementilli, wasn't there?
I imagine there were lots of options for...
Well, I'm talking about staying married.
Sure.
So were you asked at all to consider what the financial reality would be had she simply stayed married to Fabio Sementilli?
I was not.
And you understand, had she done so, then she would be getting entitled to half of his salary, whatever increases there were, correct? While they were married?
They would have joint income. Everything would be as it had been.
Right, and the health benefits would have been the same, vacation pay, trips, lifestyle, all those things would have remained the same, as far as you know, had she stayed married. Is that right?
As far as I know, I didn't do that analysis.
And the house, in all likelihood, would have increased in value? correct, as far as you know?
Between,
Object, Your Honor, it's irrelevant.
Actually, would call for speculation. Just down
And, thank you, Your Honor. And certainly the options may very well have continued to increase if they had stayed married, correct?
yes.
So isn't it true that, first of all, Mr. Rubin from the estate had told you, when you were inquiring about the facts of this case, that in his opinion, Fabio Sementilli was worth much more alive than dead? Isn't that right?
Object, that assumes facts, not evidence.
We call for hearsay. Stay on that.
Okay.
And in fact, based on your investigation and so forth, the reality is that things would have been far better financially for Monica Sementilli had she simply stayed married to Fabio Sementilli with no divorce and no murder. Is that a fair statement?
There's no way to answer that question.
You can't answer that question?
Well, there's a lot of moving parts.
Well, there's a lot of moving parts in all of your testimony. Agreed?
No.
But that, you're not willing to answer that question.
Well, most people would say you're better off to stay married. I don't know what would have happened.
Okay. Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Any regret?
Briefly. You made a point when you were asked on cross-examination with respect to tax returns, the defendant's tax returns for 2016 and 2017. You emphasized what the defendant had reported in terms of income. What's the point that you're trying to make in terms of reported income?
Objection, that's all right.
Sustained.
When you said you were asked about the defendant's tax returns and what she had reported for income. What's the issue with respect to what's reported as income versus what actually may be income?
The amounts that are reported on their tax returns reflect business expenses that, in my experience, require a little more due diligence, require some analysis. For example, they deducted $11,000 in 2015 for rent expense and $12,300 in 2016 for rent expense. And in my experience, when you have a Schedule C consulting business, that's probably some house expenses from home.
I'm going to object. This is all speculation.
I don't allow this.
So it's what you're basically saying is that just because you report something as income doesn't mean, and use it as a deduction, doesn't necessarily mean it's a true business deduction.
Right. All I'm saying is that I used in my calculations just the reported amounts, and there's clearly some additional analysis that would really have to be done if we were really doing an income available for support analysis and the real support calculations. I took everything that was reported as expenses at face value.
Regardless of whether or not they appeared to be accurate or not.
That's correct.
All right. And when you take certain perks, do they get added back in some manner as expenses that increase income?
Yes. Yes. And when we do that, when accountants do that, forensic accountants do that, typically it has a heavier effect on.
I'm going to object, Ron. This is all speculation, no foundation.
I don't allow this.
It has a greater effect on support calculations because it gets added back as non-taxable income because they're not paying taxes on it. And so whenever a perquisite is perk or personal expense is added back like that, it has a bigger effect on support.
It lowers the amount of support, correct?
It lowers the amount being received if the person receiving it is the one who is receiving, or it has the perk. If it's the other way around, then it increases support.
Okay. And you also were asked on cross-examination about using a formula, and you said, no, it's a presumption, and then you also mentioned Gavron warnings. What is a Gavron warning?
Sorry about that. Gavron refers to a case. A lot of family law uses references to case law, and Gavron was a case back in the late 1980s. A lot of old case law in family law. Back in the 1980s, where it was a 25-year marriage, but the court had indicated that the spouse should go out and look for work because a long-term marriage is not a, I believe the quote was something like, is not tantamount to Social Security. And just that California essentially has a goal that people should be self-supporting. And so whenever we hear Gavron warning, that's someone who is the supported spouse being asked to go out and try and get work, look for work. So they're not being imputed income. The court isn't saying, I'm going to give income, I'm going to pretend you were receiving income, which lowers your support. But the court is saying you should start looking for work, because if you don't, then you could be imputed income, which means that essentially the court says, I'm going to pretend you make $40,000 a year or some amount when I'm doing the calculation, even though you don't. So, and that could happen, down the road.
So when you said that it would, in your opinion, your expert opinion, it'd be highly unlikely that the defendant would receive alimony for life based on Gavron, that was, again, why you used this 3 to 5 year term that you expected based on the factors of this particular case that it might be awarded.
I think that's mixing up a few things,
Okay.
some things that I said. I wasn't saying it's based on Gavron. I'm saying that I would expect that someone who's 44 and in great or good health, who had a consulting business, who I would expect the court would likely make a Gavron warning and expect that a vocational rehab would be done. They would try to expect that she would either go back to school or do something that would make her self-supporting at some point, rather than I couldn't imagine that it would be lifetime support, but I used 5 years because it seemed to be just what I would expect. I mean, 5 years would be enough time to go back to school or find a different training, something. Just at 44, that's what I would expect.
Well, if you were also told that the defendant used to do manicures, makeup, run a salon, going back to school might not be necessary, but it might also factor into a court's decision in terms of the length of spousal support, correct?
Correct, and it may actually, the court may extend the first part of support at a higher amount so that she could build up clientele or something like that.
The temporary support versus the permanent that you talked about earlier?
Correct.
All right. And you were asked questions about, well, what if, in this case, Fabio Sementilli continued to receive salary increases? To the contrary point, what if Fabio Sementilli decided that he was going to take a step back, move his family back to Canada, and take a job with a company that was maybe a couple steps down in income level from where he was at. Would that also impact the amount of support?
Objection call for speculation, Your Honor.
It's for the expert opinion. You may answer.
It would affect support. It would decrease support if his income went down, as long as the court did not believe that he was doing it to decrease support.
And you were asked whether or not you were an attorney, and you've told us that you're a forensic accountant. You're hired by lawyers to do these sorts of calculations, correct?
That's correct.
That's your entire career, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
For courts in these situations.
That's correct.
With respect to what counsel was asking you about, I think it's on line 16, the P&G stock options, that's based on when the estate of Fabio chose or exercised those vested stock options. That was the value, correct?
Objection call for conclusion of funding.
So we're ruling that ground.
That's correct.
Based on hearsay, Your Honor. Argumentative.
It's leading, but I'm not going to do it for you, counsel.
And in terms of stock options, are those generally issued by companies such as P&G as awarded as compensation in the belief that the value of the company will continue to increase?
Leading, Your Honor.
Sustain?
What's the point of stock options being issued by a company
Objection.
as a forensic accountant?
No foundation speculation.
Sustain?
Do you deal with stock options in various estates that you are asked to analyze on a regular basis?
I do.
And what is the point of a company issuing stock options?
They are a form of compensation issued to employees to effectively give employees skin in the game. As the value of the stock goes up, so goes the value of the whole company. And so typically stock options are issued, they're issued at the current stock price. So if the value goes up over the next 12 months, then the employees share in that increase in value.
And that would be, it's up to the individual who holds the stock options, whether it be the earner or upon death, the person who inherits those stock options, to determine when to exercise options after they vest, correct?
That's correct. They make that decision.
And that would be, as you were asked about before, speculation as to all the different factors that might go into such a decision.
That's correct.
I have nothing further.
Mr. Levine.
Just briefly, Your Honor. As far as the calculation of women working and so forth, I'm not trying to be too sexist, but I guess what you're saying is if a woman gets divorced, there's no reason why she shouldn't go out there and get a job and try to support herself to the best of her ability, correct?
Either the woman or the man, whoever's being supported.
But you're not trying to say that in any way is it likely that she could earn the living that Fabio Sementilli was earning at his job?
Well, I think that would call for speculation.
Sustained.
And in terms of calculations of alimony and so forth, most of it's based on what the salary is of the male, if it's a divorce involving Fabio Sementilli, his salary, potential for increase and so forth. That's a key factor in determining what the alimony will be. Isn't that right?
That is a key factor.
But you can consider if she was bringing home $40,000 a year, you can take that into account if you're a judge or jury in a divorce case and figuring out what proper alimony figure would be, right?
You must consider her whatever compensation she receives, and there are no juries in family law.
Oh, excuse me, I haven't been in family law, thankfully.
It's okay.
This idea of Fabio moving back to Canada and taking a lesser job and so forth, you have no information that that was his intent, do you?
I don't.
All you knew from your investigation was that he was a rising star at the company, correct?
I don't know that either.
Well, do you know whether his income had been rising steadily with the company?
I know that it went up from 1 year, in 2 years, 16 to 17. I don't have historical information beyond that.
How much did it go up?
I believe it was about $20,000 in total package.
And the total figure then at that time was what?
Approximately $286,000, if I remember correctly.
Do you have any reason to believe that it would not continue to go up if he stayed?
This has all been asked.
I'm going to ask you to wait until the question is done. Finish your question, sir.
Do you have any reason to believe that that figure would not continue to increase had he remained with the company? Finally, if I can ask you this again. The scissor boy figure. You're talking about whether or not the figures on regarding scissor boy and the accounting figure when it was taking deductions and so forth were proper deductions or not. Is that right? That you're looking, that's what you were not sure of, whether the deductions and so forth, office deductions, working at home, whatever they were correct or not. Is that a fair statement?
No, that's not correct.
What is correct?
Those deductions were not related to Scissor Boy.
It's LGI.
Correct.
Okay. Did you have any information that there was any other source of income for LGI other than Scissor Boy?
Yes.
What?
Well, the tax returns reflect gross income, I believe, over 80, well, I better look because I don't recall off the top of my head.
Okay.
It's in excess of $50,000, I think, in both years that I have.
Okay, I'll accept that. Do you know the source of that income, what it was for? Was it from Scissor Boy, or do you know?
My understanding is part of it was from Scissor Boy, not all of it.
Did you look into whether or not there was a contract between Scissor Boy and Cody for a yearly payment for an app or anything else that Fabio Sementilli was involved with?
Objection of relevance.
I'm sorry, you're looking at something. If that's fine, did you find what you were looking for?
No, I was going to answer your earlier question, but I don't. $63,000 in 2015 and $54,886 in 2016.
And
Gross.
those are the amounts that went into LGI.
Gross income.
And that was a joint tax return signed by both Fabio Sementilli and Monica Sementilli, correct?
Yes, they filed jointly.
And that would mean they're both responsible for the figures and information contained in the return, correct?
Objection irrelevant.
They both sign it under penalty of perjury.
Thank you. And then again, one last question. One last question, I think. Through all your years of working in this field of forensic accounting and so forth, this is the first time you've been asked to create a chart such as this involving death versus divorce. Is that correct?
Objection asked and answered.
Yes, sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Any further other people?
Just one question. You've never testified in a murder case like this before, correct?
That
With
is-
financial gain as a motive?
That is correct.
All right. Thank you.
Any further other things? Is there anything further?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am. You're excused.
Thank you.
We can have Ms. Sementilli back on the stand, please.
Yes.